educational programs are on the website. So there's like 4 years worth. So you can just go on the cpseastbay.org.
Full concentration.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about.
And then we can read our references again. How
Yeah.
was it again?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay. Thanks. Hey, Lisa.
All right, thank you guys all for being here. I think probably most of you know who I am. I'm Dr. Jamie Shortz. I am a human chiropractor. It's supposed to be my primary job. I became an equine chiropractor by need in the area. Enough people asked me to become an equine chiropractor that I added that a few years ago. My mom is a trainer, retired now. My sister's a Kelly, my grand's like a Grand Prix dressage trainer. So I grew up in this world of dressage, so that's, I guess, what brings me here in front of you guys today. Like Vicki said, we're going to start talking about the horses today. I'm going to talk about some anatomy because I think thoracic sling is something that gets kind of thrown around a lot. Horses core, we talk about core exercises for the horses. But to really have an understanding of what the horse's core is and how it works all together and what the thoracic sling is, really, that foundational information really helps when you're trying to figure out how to achieve thoracic sling and core engagement. So beginning portion, I'm going to kind of be talking a bit using Winnie as my model here. If you guys have any questions at any point, feel free to stop me. And then we'll go through some basic thoracic sling exercises and core exercises with Mr. Winnie here. If you guys would like, I can show you how that translates to some dressage stuff with a little in-hand pee-off work with him. And then, like Vicki said, I'll grab a horse that is a school horse I've worked with once on this just to make sure he was going to behave, and bring him out to show you guys what this looks like on a horse who hasn't been working this for several months now. And then we'll get into the rider side of it because, of course, there are two parts to the equation when we're talking about teaching a horse under saddle. Ourself is the second half. So we'll get to that part at the end. That's what the stretchy bands are for. So hold on to those. We'll get back to this. I'm going to use a little note card here because I was really stressed about remembering everything, so hope you guys don't mind. So I've been around dressage my whole life. Something that I've heard a lot is dressage is good for a horse's body. Now, let's be clear. The best thing for a horse's body is to be a horse, which is to say not carrying a rider on their back. They did not evolve to carry weight on their back, right? So a horse in the wild has their head down most of the time. They might get up to run away from a predator, and then they go back to resting most of the time. I assume since we're all here at a CDS presentation, we want to work with horses because we would like to ride them. And so it's our responsibility as the people who decide we're going to ride them that we teach them how to use their body in a way that might be different from how they evolved to use their body, because they have to carry a rider's weight and they have to move for extended periods of time as a riding horse. So I want to talk a little bit about just the horse's anatomy of the spine. I'm going to grab my little spine model here. I swear he does get more enthusiastic. Anybody who knew him as a young horse probably doesn't think of him as being as calm. Okay, so here's our human spine. Obviously our spine is upright with gravity. So our spine is really designed to have gravity pushing down on it. It's meant for compression. So the discs between our spine and the joints between our spine have a lot of air in them because we have that constant compressive force on it. The horse's spine is oriented like this. So rather than having that compressive force, it has shear force on the joints of the spine, pushing down on it at all times. That's even without a rider's weight on its back. So just as an example, I'm a chiropractor. When I adjust a human, you hear a lot of popping sounds typically. The sound of the popping when you adjust is there's a lot of air between those joints. When you gap a joint, like pulling a cork out of a wine bottle, it makes that popping sound because the air goes into a big air bubble. When I adjust horses, you almost never hear popping sounds because if they had that much air in their joint, they would have no stability against gravity. We would not be able to sit on them. So for them, stability of their spine is a lot more important than that compressive force. Now keep in mind, when we're breeding horses these days, we want these horses with this big elastic movement, right? Well, if you have horses with a lot of movement in their joints, it's not just going to be their legs that move that much. All of their joints are going to be more mobile. So when we're riding these really talented, really flashy horses, it becomes all the more important that we teach the horses how to support our weight and their weight with core engagement. So in the wild, horses typically are with their head down, right? Most of the day, they're in grass pasture, or not pasture, in the wild, eating grass, when they put their head down, has everyone heard the term nuchal ligament? Probably not a new term to people. Nuchal ligament is a big ligament, runs along the top of the whole horse. It's got this big sheet of ligament that connects down to the vertebra of the neck. The horse's vertebra of their neck are actually down below here. This is all muscle and fascia. So when their head goes down, which he's not gonna do because I don't have food for him, there we go. It pulls on that nuchal ligament, it raises the horse's back up. So first and foremost, they're spending a lot of time with their back raised just from that passive structure. Of course, our show horses typically are not in that environment. They're most of the day with their head up, maybe sticking out of a stall door. And then the other thing is horses in the wild, they're not like, you don't see them cantering in circles. They will run away from something and then they hold still. And their goal when they're moving is to get away from a predator that's trying to kill them. They're not thinking about, am I using my core? Am I supporting myself? And they don't have to because they're moving for, 2 minutes, running away. As long as they didn't get caught by whatever was chasing them, they go back to relaxing. Their joints get to relax, their head goes back down, their back comes back up. So our show horses are not doing this. They're coming out day after day for 45 minutes, an hour of work, carrying weight on their back. So these are all the considerations of why we have to talk about things like thoracic sling and core on our show horses. So just as an example of this, I want everybody to stand up for a second. Sorry, Bobby, I know you was tired. So I want you to imagine that I just told the person next to you that they have to pick you up. And you want to make yourself as light as you can to make it as easy as possible, okay? So I want everybody to think, make yourself light, okay? Now imagine I told the person next to you to pick you up and you don't want to be picked up. You're going to make yourself as heavy as possible. You're going to sink down, right? So we can use our muscular system to influence our relationship with gravity. You're welcome to sit down if you'd like. So this is kind of our horses in the wild. When they're running away, all they care about is getting away as fast as possible. So they're going, if you imagine a sprinter, this is another imagine, you don't have to do this. If I said sprint across this arena as fast as you can, think about how tense your body is and how much force you have on the ground, right? You're probably pounding your knees. I know my knees would not love it if I sprinted across this as fast as I could. Versus if I said, okay, run across the arena, spend as much time in the air as you can, right? You can make yourself really light, very airy, land very lightly on the ground. That's what we're trying to teach our horses to do, is support their body through the muscular slings and influence their relationship with gravity and to be able to carry our weight against gravity. So we're going to talk about kind of 3 different sections of the horse here. Grab one more thing. He won't go anywhere, he's fine. He looks so happy. Let me pick my old guy for this. Okay, so you're back. All right, so we've got the hind end of the horse, the front end of the horse, and then the core that connects the two. So starting talking about the hind end of the horse, I want you to imagine 2 big gears. So we've got a big gear for his butt, a big gear for his shoulder, and then the sling that ties them together. Anybody saw the post I made about this? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about. So the hind end is what we talk about a lot in dressage, right? And so this isn't going to be revolutionary to a bunch of dressage riders. If we tilt this pelvis back, like a gear tilting back, it's going to bring the hind legs closer to the horse's center of gravity. It's going to lift the front end up, and it's going to generate power with that hind leg coming more underneath. In theory, dressage, we really talk about the hind end. That should be a thing, right? That hind leg comes under, it lifts the front end up. However, 2/3 of the horse is in front of the hind end. But the horse's intestines alone weigh 550 pounds. Of course, his size probably, 1,400 pounds. 2/3 of that weight is in front of this butt here. No matter how strong this butt is, if it has to crank itself all the way under to lift that whole weight up, plus my weight sitting on here, that's a lot of strain on the hind end, right? A lot of strain on the SIs, the lumbar spine, the hocks, the stifles. It's just, you can imagine I'm holding something here and trying to pull it up, that's a lot of weight. So if we can teach the horse to support their weight from their own muscle slings underneath, that's going to be beneficial, right? Why would we not want to teach them to do that? As far as where we sit on the horse, it's actually one of the least stable areas of the horse's spine. If we could sit over their shoulder or over their butt, They're a lot more stable there. They've got that leg supporting them against gravity. It's just not very convenient for us to sit there or there. So we sit here, teach them to use their body properly. So I'm not going to talk so much about the hind end because I think all your dressage trainers probably already talked to you a lot about the horse's hind end and how we get it underneath. I'm going to kind of move up to the front end here. Imagine we've got another big gear here. Its job is to transmit power. So if we imagine this gear with the core linking it, if we rotate this back, it's going to shorten that core. So imagine this is the core connecting the two ends. If this end is rotated that way, where the thoracic sling is not engaged, that core is already really stretched. And that hind end is having to pull on a core that's already really stretched. If we rotate this gear back and move this stretchy core back, this gives the hind end a lot more leverage to engage that core and shift the weight back there. So what is the thoracic sling? Has everybody heard the term thoracic sling before?
Yes.
Okay, great. So horses do not have a collarbone like we do. So if we were to go on all fours, our collarbone would prevent our rib cage from dropping down too much in front. Horses don't have a collarbone. They have muscle slings that support all that 550 pounds of intestine plus all their bones, muscles, everything else is all supported by muscle slings. Their shoulders are only attached to their body by these muscle slings. So the kind of three, depending on where you Google, there's many muscles that can be included as part of the thoracic sling. I'm going to talk specifically about three of them. We've got the pectoral muscles. These go from the sternum, the chest bone of the horse, and they connect out to the horse's arm. So their arm is actually, they've got their scapula, their shoulder blade is here, their shoulder is here, their upper arm is here, and then this part is actually their forearm. Their knee is like our wrist. So a little comparative anatomy there. So the pectoral muscles go from that chest bone out to the horse's arm, and they hold the horse's chest. So when those muscles are relaxed and not developed, the horse's chest is going to sink down. So you guys can all kind of imagine bringing your shoulder blades like this, bringing your shoulder blades together and your chest kind of falling down. That's the horse when their pectoral muscles are not engaged. When those muscles engage, it brings the front legs wider, it broadens the chest, and it lifts the horse's entire front end up. So this is like when you see a young horse who's very base narrow with a really narrow chest, those pectoral muscles are not yet developed. The second muscle is the serratus thoracis, or the serratus ventralis thoracis division. Goes from the inside of the horse's shoulder blade here, and it wraps around and connects to the ribs. So when that muscle contracts, it lifts the rib cage up between the shoulder blades. There's also the cervical portion of that. And then the subclavius muscle, which goes from the under part of the horse's ribs down here and wraps around the front of the shoulder blade and connects in. So again, can either bring the shoulder blade down or lift the rib cage up, depending on how stable that shoulder blade is. So you guys can do this seated if you'd like. I just want to give a feeling example of how that core works. So put your hands around your rib cage here. And I want you to flare your ribs up towards the sky. So kind of arch your back and flare your ribs up. Do you feel how stretched out your abs are there? Now I want you to rotate those ribs down and forward, almost like you're doing a crunch. Feel how that engages those core muscles and shortens them a lot. So that's what it's talking about with that front end. When those muscles contract, the three thoracic sling muscles we talked about, rotate the rib up. So I'm going to give a little demo here. Rotates the ribs up, engages the chest, front end comes up, it shortens those abs. So those, for us, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Oh, I did this and my abs contracted. But for the horses, they've got all that weight coming down on them, shortening that lever from that shoulder, lifting back it up, makes a really big difference for the amount of leverage on their core. And then there's just a few other muscles that are not related to the thoracic sling. They're related to the neck, but they are really impacted by how the thoracic sling is activated. So we already talked about the serratus thoracis. The serratus cervicis goes from the lower vertebra of the neck up to the shoulder blade. So if this shoulder blade is dropped like this, as we talked about, that chest falling down, shoulder blades are locked up and together. If that muscle contracts, it's going to invert the neck, right? Shoulder blades are like this. That muscle contracts, it's going to invert the neck. If we instead get them to lift through their chest, bring their shoulder blades down, then we activate that muscle, it's going to lift the neck from the base. So we get a taller neck that can stay out instead of an inverted neck. Another big neck muscle here is our trapezius muscle. It goes from the nuchal ligament top from middle of the neck to just behind the withers, connects to the shoulder blade there. Again, if that shoulder blade is fallen up because the horse isn't lifted, there's very little leverage for that trapezius to work. So they're going to end up not having very much freedom in their shoulders, in their front end, versus if the horse has pushed themselves against gravity, lifted themselves up here, that trapezius has a lot of leverage to act on that shoulder blade and really get a nice free shoulder. Keep in mind, the saddle also sits on the trapezius muscle. So we're going to talk a little bit about the saddle fit. But if that saddle is sitting on that trapezius, it's also really going to limit how much motion the horse can have at that shoulder because that muscle is being pinched. And then last one, kind of similar to the serratus cervicis, the splenius cervicis goes from the lower cervicals to the vertebra of the upper back here. Again, if the horse is dropped in their back, that muscle is going to invert the neck. If the horse is raised in their back, it's going to lift the neck. So the way that they're using their core really impacts the way that they can use their entire body. That's probably not revolutionary. So what do horses use instead if they don't have a developed thoracic sling? So they have a big muscle here called the brachiocephalicus. If I raise his head up, you can see that under neck muscle bulge out there. The next horse I'm going to bring out is a little more developed brachiocephalicus muscle. That muscle goes from the side of C1 to C5 to their upper neck and connects into their arm here. So that muscle can literally pull the leg from the neck, from the lower part of the neck. You see this like if you watch a young horse go over cavalettis and they're not over their back. What do? They raise their head up and the front leg comes up super high. Looks really fancy. Another example is like our cart horses. They bring that neck up. They can get that front leg up really high, but they're not using the muscles to support their entire core. It's just they're pulling themselves up from the neck. The other thing about this muscle is it's a very protective muscle. So a horse in the wild wants to protect its throat. That's where an animal that's attacking it is likely to go at its throat. So whenever a horse is scared, their reaction is going to be to tighten up that muscle, because if something bites into a big muscle that's all big and contracted, it's going to protect that muscle. It's going to take a lot for teeth to get through that big muscle. So when we're working with a horse to try to get them to relax in the brachiocephalicus, it's really important that they feel safe. If they're, this is not something to take them to a show and work on for the very first time. They're not going to relax for you. He's clearly pretty relaxed here, so not such an issue, but that is a consideration. So if you Google core work for the horse, typically, what are you going to see? Anyone have any? Throw out some things that you'll see for a horse's core work. Bands, belly. Okay, these are all pretty good ones. Actually, I see a lot cavalettis and hill work, which are not inherently bad things. I have no problem with cavalettis or with hill work, but I just use cavalettis as an example of how a horse can use the wrong muscles to move their front leg. Doing those things I consider to be more cross-training. They're not just going to magically use themselves properly because you put them over cavalettis. An example of this, if you've never been to the gym before and you come to me at my chiropractic office and I say, oh, you need stronger glutes, and you go to the gym and you throw a heavy barbell on your back and you do 100 squats with terrible form, you're probably going to get injured and you're probably not going to get stronger glutes. So what I'm going to show today, it's going to look really boring. It's not going to look like a lot. What this is more like physical therapy. It's like teaching your horse to use little muscles that they're not used to using, or to relax muscles that they're used to having tight. And it takes more concentration than it does physical effort. So none of this is going to make them sweaty or tired. This is stuff that you're going to do for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes before or after a ride, or do on your horse's day off. This is not something you're going to drill for an hour and a week from now your horse is going to have 6-pack abs. It's just not what the thoracic sling work is about. So like I said, they need to be relaxed, and it's very detailed stuff. When I first was introduced to this, I had just gotten him back from being on a lease, and I was like, he's my Grand Prix horse. This is going to be so easy. I'm just going to do it just to see. And I was shocked, one, what a difference it made for him, and two, how hard it was for him. I was like, what do you mean my Grand Prix horse doesn't have a thoracic sling? So on that note, I know most of you guys probably know Mr. Winnie here, he's kind of a legend, but I've had him since he was 3. He has always been difficult. He had a bit of a rearing problem.
What did you have?
What's that? A rearing problem. So when he struggled with something, his reaction was always to rear, or he would root the reins. I was super lucky to ride with some really amazing trainers. What did I hear a lot of is drive the hind end under, drive the hind end under. He was chronically sore in his SI joints, chronically sore in his low back, despite he had the best saddle fit, the best body workers, all of that. Like I said, I was introduced to this while he was out on lease for 2 years, and he came back and I was like, this won't be an issue for him. He's a Grand Prix horse. I was shocked how narrow his chest was when I took a look at him. I was like, oh my gosh. I've been trying to drive that hind end under, and he can't get his front end up and out of the way. And so his reaction when he feels trapped, like he can't get his front end up, is middle finger, stand up. Or grab the rein and run forward. And this is kind of a common thing we see in horses that don't have a developed thoracic sling. It's like, I can't go with my hind leg, my front end is in the way. Now, he's a pretty uphill horse. To look at him go, you wouldn't think this horse is dropped in his thoracic sling because he moves uphill. But I've had 0 behavioral issues since I've started working on all this. So I know that's one horse case study, but some other things that you sometimes will see is things like bolting, where they feel like they're trapped and they want to get out, or just issues like, they don't have freedom in the half pass. They can't move over in the half pass. Another thing I see sometimes is a horse who's weaker on one side of their thoracic sling, they'll tend to fall in on that side, because in order to be able to stand up, they have to be able to keep their front leg wide, right? So if going around a turn, they don't have the strength to keep their front leg wide enough to support that, so they'll lean in like this and fall in. So these are just some of the things, it doesn't mean that if your horse does these things, its thoracic sling is horrible, but this is something that can make a pretty big difference with this I say all this because you're going to look at it and be like, that's really boring, you're not doing anything. I swear, it really does make a difference. Okay, so let's get to the fun. So the first step of this is going to be teaching them to release that brachiocephalicus. So one thing I forgot to mention about that muscle, it works counteractively to the thoracic sling. That's why it's a problem. When that under neck is turned on, it turns off the muscles of the thoracic sling. They drop down, they lift their leg from the lower neck instead of lifting themselves up from the core. And so the first thing we need to do is teach them to relax that brachiocephalicus. And he's going to demonstrate it nicely here on his own. A good rule of thumb for that is that their jugular groove right here is parallel with the ground. So depending on your horse's conformation, he has a pretty tall neck. The next horse I'm going to pull out has a little bit lower of a neck. That height might change a little bit, but what you want to see is that this muscle right here turns off. So I like to do groundwork in a rope halter, not because people think of a rope halter as being harsher, it's got these pressure points. What it actually is that the knots give more specific aids. So rather than it just pushing on their whole nose, it gives kind of a more specific aid and you can be more specific. So that's why I like the rope halter for this kind of work. So he's gonna drop into it pretty easily because he's used to this work here. So I'm just gonna gently kind of put that pressure. You can use treats to get them down. I don't love it because then they get really distracted by the treats. There we go. So I usually will kind of use my hand. You'll see a lot of this like licking and chewing. For him, he really commonly will get kind of mouthy with this and he'll sometimes drop. Which sometimes for some horses can be that they're overstimulated and you kind of need to take a break from it. It's also kind of like meditation. So we're trying to get them to activate muscles that they're not used to activating. If you've ever tried to meditate and you're told not to think, all you can do is think. It's kind of how it is for them when they're trying to find these muscles. So I don't get super concerned if they seem really relaxed and okay, but they're getting a little mouthy. You'll get a lot of this like yawning because that's a very protective muscle.
One exercise.
Yep.
That's it.
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to go somewhere with this.
No. I just want to make that I'm not missing you something.
So this is step one, right? So until that brachiocephalicus is relaxed, we can't activate the thoracic sling because they act counteractive to each other. But like I said, this is a really basic thing. Obviously looks like nothing. You can see it's doing something for him.
Yeah.
He's yawning a lot. He's probably dropped right now. He usually is. And when their neck drops down like that, you'll see if you watch their chest actually starts to engage because as they relax this muscle, they have to hold themselves up here. So that's step one is just go ahead.
So do you not have to go very far with that? Very subtle.
No, so that if they do go too far, it's almost like because you want them to hold themselves up, right? So if I take his nose all the way to the ground, he's kind of just falling forward. So we want it to be kind of like parallel right when this turns off, and then just have him relax there. Obviously, he's very familiar with what I'm asking. So it took me probably a week of doing this for like 5 minutes every day before he actually could stand there with it relaxed. He'd like relax it and then come back up, and then relax it and come back up. I could have sworn if I talked to you about how I've trained him over the last 18 years I've had him, that I rode this horse off the bottom of his neck, like it relaxed in the bottom of his neck, but nope, guess not, because he has a very difficult time stretching, and this work was very profound for him.
So is this for a specific period of time you would have him kind of in that relaxed pose? Is that the way to look at this?
So yeah, the goal is to teach them to relax that muscle all the time. Part of why we do this is so that they can learn to do it on their own as well. So we'd love it if they stand in their stall kind of in this.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're going to, but
What's the
but we
chances?
want to teach them that they have other muscles they can use, right? So that's the first thing. And then from there, we take it to doing things. So being able to walk off and keep that relaxed. Obviously he knows how to do this. You'll see on the next horse, as soon as you go to walk off, you'll get him to relax, you go to get him to walk off, and he pulls that head up again. So being able to walk off, being able to halt, and then really anything you want to do with your horse, you're walking them at the show ground. This is a really great exercise to do with them, and you'll get that neck to stay down there. Good boy.
So, quick question, do you hold a particular low that he stays low with his head, or is he just automatically staying then low when you start putting his head down and then you move on?
Yeah, so it's when this muscle relaxes. That spot's going to be a little different from every horse. Generally, when this jugular groove is parallel with the ground is the spot where most horses are the most relaxed in that muscle. If you go too far below that, it'll turn back on again. So for him, that's about here. He always gets mouthy when I do this. And then you want it to kind of stay there. But if you really watch your horse when you're doing this, and if you watch on his chest, I'm gonna ask him to walk off. You'll see that pec fire. You see that? The pec, here, I'll do it facing at you guys. Because they have to support themselves, right? And if they can't support themselves on the lower neck, watch his chest muscle there. You see that muscle fire there a little bit? So I promise we're moving on from this, but that is the step one, because until that's relaxed, nothing else matters. We can't get anything else to engage. Step two is getting them to actually engage their thoracic sling, where they rotate their ribs up. So traditionally with this work, it says, just shift their weight back, teach them to shift their weight back. I find that I spend a lot of time just asking them to back up or shift their weight without them totally understanding if they've never accessed these muscles before. So I tend to use the belly tuck reflex for this. Has everybody done the belly tuck reflex before? No, okay. So first we want that neck in the shape that we want. Second, I do it with my hand. He does this often. For horses who have not done this and don't have a very strong reflex, you can use a hook pick. You're not digging in, it just is a little bit more specific. You come right under, it's like a little bit behind where the girth goes. And you just scratch there. Oh, excuse me, there. Okay. And he used to do that a lot more. I think he's just getting annoyed with me because he's been out a lot. But these muscles, when I started doing this with him, he didn't have these muscles, or at least not as good as they should have been for the level of work he was in. So he'd get grumpy about it. Those muscles were sore. I'm not gonna really work him through it being sore. I might do a little bit less that day or do a little bit more walking first or whatever. There you go, good boy. But you can see, and it's hard. They'll start kind of moving away from it. They're like, I don't know how to activate those core muscles. But do you see how the shoulder rotates as the ribs come up when I do that? Good boy, good boy.
You're right behind where the girth would be?
Yep, right behind where the girth is. Now, once he's kind of activated those muscles, good boy, I can get some of that weight shift without doing the belly tuck. But I pretty much use that belly tuck every day. That's not how you get him to go. He activated his lower neck. But I do want him to start to find that on his own too. So I use, and when they won't give this lower neck muscle, there's a point, here buddy, kind of right to the inside of the shoulder here, that if you add a little bit of pressure, it'll bring that neck down and they'll kind of shift away from it a little bit too. So I've got the shoulder here, right inside of it, there's like a little point. I'm not pushing hard, I'm just kind of right with my thumb, just a little bit of pressure there, tends to make them drop the neck and activate those muscles a little bit. Yeah, good. Good. And I've done a fair bit of in-hand pee-off work with him over the years. And when we did that, we did a lot of backing up before I knew about this work. So he tends to want to back up when I do this, which is okay. They can take a step back. What you don't want is when they back up that they take a big step behind and a small step in front, because that's hollowing the back, right? So if they are gonna back up, you wanna see the front end takes a bigger step than the hind end so that they come more together. And if you're not getting that, you can ask them to back up with their butt against a wall so that they can't actually step back, but they're kind of getting that weight shift. But if they start activating that lower neck, instead of shifting their weight, go back to getting the neck relaxed, because the most important thing is that firing of the chest muscle there. So, good. There, good boy. Good. So see the front leg takes a bigger step than the hind. That's okay, because that's activating the core and bringing them back. Again, a rein back is a thing that, like Cavaletti's, done correctly is really good for the core, done incorrectly does absolutely nothing for their core and probably hollows them out. So just important to think about how that's working there. Good. So that's kind of the second step, and then it can be, the whip here so he's not so lazy, it can be incorporated with the same as step one. So I'm gonna halt, put his neck back down, okay, yeah, good, little weight shift there, and then walk off. And you'll notice when they walk off, when they're first doing this, they walk kind of slowly and awkwardly. If you guys have ever been to physical therapy and they're telling you to activate muscles that you don't know how to activate and you feel really awkward, that's how they feel when they're doing this. You're telling them to fire that chest and now walk forward, and they're kind of like, what? So don't be surprised. It's not like, don't chase them forward in that moment. I have this because he's going to sleep, but you get that little weight shift, walk forward. And he kind of looks like he's concentrating really hard to be able to walk like that. That's pretty normal for that. And then step 3 is teaching them to dissociate their shoulders from that. So the brachiocephalicus that they will use a lot, they don't have their thoracic sling, attaches to the inside of the shoulder. So it will, when it brings the leg forward, it also and use some of that backing up there, getting that thoracic sling engaged. Good. You'll see there, he's wanting to go to that lower neck.
He's also
He's not wanting to raise himself up.
even more fun.
You know? Yeah. Good. That's not his forte. He's also a little asleep. But you see how he wants to go to that lower neck to get his front end up. So I'm coming back to that. Okay, I'm gonna halt, relax that lower neck, get that thoracic sling firing, wake him up enough. Yeah, good. There, good, better. Come on, tap. Good, come on. Good. Yeah, there. Better there, where he starts to actually lift himself up. Again, he's never gonna pee off like one. Yeah. So not my best planning to have him stand here for an hour before I did this with him. But do you guys see what I'm getting at? That he wants to pull himself up here, but he can't really get the front end out of the way. He has moments where he starts to come here and he can sit so much better. That's what we're looking for. If he was, 7 instead of 21, I'd ask him to do this a little bit harder. But He's done his time. It's the last time he'll ever be asked to in-hand pee off. But do you guys kind of understand where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm gonna go switch out for the other horse. Be right back.
Quick question.
Sure.
On a lot of horses, you see this triangle right here.
It's on the other side of the room. Okay.
Developed.
Thanks.
This is not. Is that all because they're, what is that caused from?
So that's going to be your trapezius muscle. It kind of has two parts of it.
There's
It has
two.
the part that connects to the top of the neck, the part that connects to here. Before I switch out for him, I had a few things I wanted to talk about, so this is related. So saddle fit, it's really important that your saddle fitter looks at the horse both standing and under saddle, because as you can see, when I give him that lift cue, his back completely changes. The amount of space he would need in his shoulder if his back was dropped compared to when his back is up is a huge difference. So a lot of times we see underdeveloped trapezius muscles in horses who have a saddle that's too tight, for when they're going. The horse might have the ability to lift its back, but the saddle doesn't let it do so. So having a saddle fitter that is going to look at your horse when it's in the frame that we want them to be in is really important. Sometimes that's going to mean adding some extra padding. The saddle might look too wide when the horse, for him, it would look too wide when he's just standing here, but when his ribs come up, it's not. So you use extra padding on the half pad or whatever to create something that the horse can move that space into. So that's one reason. Another is some horses, if they have a ton of freedom in front, that trapezius muscle pulls the shoulder forward in front, it pulls it back from behind. So if they're kind of really free in front, but not lifted enough to bring that leg back, the part of the trapezius that brings the leg back is not going to be as developed. That was something with him when I started this. I was working on just kind of stretching and seeing his shoulder mobility. He could bring his shoulder forward fine. When I asked him to stretch it back, he was like falling over. One more thing I forgot to mention when we were doing the step 2 with the belly lift. Doing this with one leg up too. I do this with him when I'm tacking him up, lifting one leg and giving that stretch. That makes sense. It's hard for him. It's harder for him on that leg. They not only have to lift their ribs, but also stabilize that shoulder. So if they've never done this before, that's a little bit too challenging for them. But that's something that when you're tacking up, you can check on that. Can I give that belly scratch with one leg up and they stabilize that shoulder on the opposite side? And then last thing was, I had 2 more things and I lost my little card, but, the blanket fit. So if you've ever worn a backpack that doesn't fit well or is really heavy, how fatigued your shoulders are at the end of the day. That's how our horses feel if we're in a blanket that's pulling on their shoulders all the time. If they're getting like shoulder rubs and whatnot. These muscles that we're asking them to develop are probably really fatigued just from standing in their stall with their blanket on. So really important to have a blanket that fits them well. And then the third thing is the cross ties. So please don't ask your trainers to do this. They're gonna hate me if you say don't cross tie my horse. But I don't know many horses that go on a cross tie and just stand with like slack in the cross ties. Most of them will just kind of inherently lean against it. Even him, who stands here like this with his neck down, if I put cross ties on, he leans like this. And so the 15 minutes you're tacking up, the horse is sitting there with their under neck turned on before you get on and ask them to turn it off. So something to play around with your own horse is I usually either just throw the rope over his back like that or ground tie him. Obviously he's really good. But that is something to play with because you don't want to be warming up all the muscles that we want them to turn off before we go and sit on them. So just take a look at your horse and see if that's an issue for your horse. All right, I'll be right back. Oh yeah.
So I'm finding a lot of horses where the sling is overused and it's super, super tight. So for them, just dropping their head is going to help relax that.
Yeah, I would start with just giving that brachiocephalicus. There's you see this a lot in people that a lot of times the muscles are tight when they're weak.
Okay.
So like hip flexors, people tend to have really tight, really weak hip flexors. I would imagine it's probably pretty similar on the horses with tight thoracic slings, is that they're not developed enough and so they're kind of out of stretch all the time, which makes them really tight because it's like a stretched rubber band.
Yeah.
So getting that brachiocephalicus relaxed where they have to lift through the thoracic sling a little more.
Well, it's more in the pecs and then
Okay.
the serratus.
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably from
It's
weakness.
like being compressed though more
Yeah,
and
yeah.
not being ridden out.
Probably, yeah, where it's like getting stretched in ways that it's overworking but not actually strong enough to support the horse. So
Right.
step 1, definitely. Step 1's always going to be releasing that brachiocephalicus muscle. It's going to make the horse more relaxed. in general because of that being such a protective muscle.
Yeah.
All right, be right back. Come on, Lillian. And Julie, I was thinking about your question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Winnie actually was very tight in his pecs before I started working on this. Horses they really generally want to be good, and they're really good master compensators. So if they're weak in the muscles that really support this, they will recruit the muscles to try to do what we ask. Like when he was a Grand Prix horse and had very little thoracic sling, when I started doing this, he'd still use his pecs, but it wasn't in a way to lift his chest. So he's got this dropped chest, really stretched out pec, and then he's trying to be able to do the Grand Prix half pass. Yeah, those muscles were really sore because they're working. If you've ever used a muscle at full extension, like we talked about with their core, it's a lot harder to use it at full extension, and so they'll end up making it really sore.
Well, I'm finding it like with horses, like rehabbing more. So that was like stabilizing, and they're on the forehead.
Okay, yep.
That they're engaging that.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
drop.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I would start with the relaxing the lower neck then, with that brachiosthalgus.
Interesting.
Yeah, he'll be a good example of that. So he's got a fluffy neck. I didn't give him as clean as Winnie, so sorry. But this is Gus. He's a school horse, so he's not as trained in his dressage work, and obviously conformationally is not well-bred Hanoverian. I actually don't know what his breeding is, but he's a sweetheart. But you can see just looking at him, he's got a lot more developed to his brachiosthalgus than Winnie has, right? So still not a crazy narrow chest on him, but you can see he does stand a little bit base narrow. Whatever his breed is, has something that does give him a little bit wider of a chest. I think he's like 14 or something. But I've worked with him once on this just to make sure he was gonna cooperate for me. So you'll see he's a smart boy. He's already kind of figured out what I want. But as soon as I ask him to drop that neck down, usually it doesn't happen that fast. Wow. It does. You'll start to see that chest muscle activate a little bit there. There you go. See that start to fire? Good boy. So another thing to look for with that weight shift, typically horses stand, even uphill built horses will stand with 60% of their weight on their front legs. So you'll see a little bit of a forward lean. You'll notice this now that I've said it, even when you look at like sales photos, they'll be a little bit lean forward on their front legs. So that weight shift that we're looking for, you'll see their front legs start to come a little bit more straight up and down. So, as I start talking, he goes to that brachiosthalgus again. So it's just this little gentle kind of nudge down. And then if he's not getting it, it's that little pressure point right behind the shoulder. There, good boy, good boy. And then he just has to stand there in it. It's not, like I said, not physically that challenging. It's more for them emotionally having to give and really think about what they're doing. And often they will get really distracted. Because like I said, it's kind of like meditation for them. They're like, I can't concentrate that hard on my body. Good. Good boy. Good boy. There you go. There, good man. There. Good job. So then from there for him, back on it again, for him being able to walk forward and maintain that is obviously a little harder for Winnie in part because he's built less uphill. So he has to support himself, but see his chest have to fire there to walk off with his neck down. Good boy. And if I wasn't monitoring him, he would want to go to raising that neck up again. I'm going to do this at you guys so you can watch his chest. You'll see him start to walk really slow as they really think about it, but he really, see how much more he wants to go to that under neck than when this is what it typically looks like when you start this. And I've been surprised, even on, I've done it on a PRE. If you look at a PRE's neck, you're like, there's no way they could be tight in their under neck, but it's just, that's the shape of their neck. They still really can go to that under neck.
Can you show us really clearly where that pressure point is that seems to make him?
Yeah, you guys
I can't tell exactly.
come feel it if you want. It's right, so here's kind of the shoulder. It's right inside that shoulder. You guys can see the voice. Oh, this is the shoulder. It's right inside of it. It's right in there. That's right where that brachiosthalgus muscle ties in. And so if you just, it's like, I can show you on your arm. I'm not digging in, it's like this. I'm just kind of cueing them, like, this is the muscle I want you to get.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And that's the same muscle when you're riding and you're trying to get your horse to give, right? It's not about, we don't want to roll cur them with their nose between their knees. We want them to give in that lower neck where this part gives and the neck can go down and out. Winnie was very hard to get to stretch, and I spent a lot of time being like, it's okay if he's behind the vertical in the stretch, until I realized that it wasn't. He was getting behind the vertical so that he could, while being stretched, could still use that tight lower neck to pull the front leg forward. So
you use always one side, just.
I mean, I'm just standing on the side in part because his mane is on
So
the
you're
side.
not doing one side and then the other
It
side.
can be either. Really, but this is just
So
a little
that's not the
cue.
point.
Yeah, and they're just more familiar with being on that side. It doesn't matter. It can be either side. Obviously,
I
when you're
kind of
doing,
was thinking it does make a difference.
yeah, and for some horses it does. Also, of course, when you're doing the stepping sideways, you got to do it on both sides. Good boy, Betty. But yeah, so let's see if I can get him to walk off facing at you guys. See that chest fire there? Right on the walk off. And that's where they'll until they figure that out, they're like, can I bring my head up? And then finally they'll leave the neck and you'll see that pec fire. That's what you're looking for. Good boy, Betty. So then for him, he also always drops, which is kind of funny. There. Good. So then that belly scratch. I'm not gonna do that belly scratch until that lower neck is giving. Good. And see how, like, you just have to be really patient. It's really boring. I just put on an audiobook and work on it for 10 minutes. So obviously he doesn't have as much flexibility with that as Winnie does. He's probably one who could use to be adjusted. He might be a little locked up in there. He's a school horse. He's using saddles that are not necessarily the best fit for him, and he has a little more dip in his back. So getting that motion, I don't expect him to be able to raise this much the second time I work on this with him. So that just kind of shows you that horses are going to be different, and you have to take your time with this.
So will you just stay with him, the lowering the neck, or releasing the neck, and then just a little bit of belly lift?
Yeah.
Could you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, I do that with Winnie every day before I get on. Like I said, you're probably not going to work this for an hour. You'd be bored out of your mind. But yeah, that's totally, it's not that physically hard for them. It's more kind of showing them that pattern of how they can use themselves. And you can see now, like, he's starting to drop into that a little bit on his own, just from a few minutes. So that's the ultimate goal, is that we show them how they can use their body in a way that's a little different. The other thing that I didn't get too much into this because this is kind of more vet territory, but that brachiophalicus, when it's overdeveloped, we talked about how it brings everything in towards midline because it attaches to the inside of the shoulder. All of the nerves that go from the horse's lower neck to their front leg go right underneath that muscle in between their shoulder blades. So when they're chronically really narrow, those muscles can end up, or those nerves can end up being compressed, versus as they learn to broaden their chest and support their legs out from the outside muscles of the shoulder, it decompresses those nerves. Sometimes it can help with horses who have like mysterious front end lameness. We have seen this have a good effect.
So you're talking about the nerve bundles that are just under the scapula?
Yes.
So I do in fact actually have that with her, and it's insidious because it doesn't, it just comes and goes.
Totally.
And it is like, it feels like she's just not quite stepping forward with the right shoulder quite enough, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. So I'm interested in ways to help her use her body, because of course she's just coming 7. I mean,
Sure.
she's going to be 7 at the end of it, but of course she's big.
Sure.
And big shoulder, and she wants to use her brachiophalicus
Yes.
to do everything, right?
Totally.
The one hit wonder solution.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah, super common in horses. So a lot of this work that I'm talking about comes from a program called the Balance Through Movement Method. Celeste, I can't remember her full name, but she has a whole online program. That's where I've taken parts from her, parts from other sources that I've had in my own schooling and chiropractic, obviously. But that might be a good program. Her whole thing is like mysterious front end lamenesses.
Okay.
She talks mostly just about the thoracic sling, less about the hind end and core, so I've tried to incorporate all of that. But yeah, I mean, it is, if you know what thoracic outlet syndrome is in humans, we've got this exact same thing. The nerves coming out of our neck go underneath our collarbone, through our shoulder, down our arm. If you get compression in this area, people work at a computer, driving all the time, yada yada, all the compression here can put pressure on the nerves and the blood vessels, and you get symptoms going down the arms. There's no reason to believe that our horses wouldn't also have that, especially our horses who are carrying humans that are, want to kind of drop down here. So, yeah, that's just an intro to all of this stuff, but sorry, I know it looks really boring. That's why I try to say, like, it really has had a really big impact on Winnie, because even though it looks small, it can be pretty profound for the horses. So, does anyone have any more questions on that before I move on to humans?
How do you get that to work when you're under saddle? How do you get them to lift there?
We're getting there. That's why we got to work on you next. Next part, we'll talk about the human. I mean, that is, of course, I'm not here to be your guys' horse trainer. That's not what I want to do. But we do have to figure out how to support ourselves so that we can kind of, I call it, like when I am teaching, I call it a space vacuum with your seat. You have to find a way to make yourself light and wrap your leg around your horse and use your legs effectively off your core to cue the horse like that, right? That you're saying, okay, I'm going to make myself light, put my legs underneath you and lift your back up underneath. Until the horses know how to fire those muscles on their own, they're not going to be able to, right? So that's why this groundwork can be really helpful to teach them how to access those muscles, because I can literally get underneath and say, lift your back up. Once they understand that, it is easier to cue it, but of course we have to be able to ask for it. So that's where we get to the rider core. Further more questions?
So is less of a groove then under their neck is actually a good thing, right? That means there's less, okay.
Yeah, and every horse's anatomy is going to be a little different. This horse is never going to have Winnie's neck. He's just not built the same. But the goal is, and as this lower neck starts to relax and over time kind of get less developed, that trapezius muscle fills in more. And so if you have the horse who has the kind of no top line type neck, getting that trapezius more involved will help with that.
Okay.
If you think treats are too distracting, what's his motivation? Just positive, just making you happy, getting positive.
I have no problem with treats whatsoever. The problem with it with this work is, you can see I've been playing with his mouth here, and now he's just chasing me around, following my hand. So I use the kind of pressure point. It actually, they really like it. You saw when he was doing the yawning and stuff. Like, this is not high pressure work for him. This is, you're teaching them to relax muscles. It tends to feel good and relieves those nerve bundles and stuff. When I started it with Winnie, I did treats, and it was fine, because sometimes they don't want to lower their neck. He just ended up chasing me around with his nose. So no problem with treats at all. It's just if they get too distracted by it, this is physical therapy right there. Just teaching them how to use those different muscles. This shouldn't feel fatiguing for them. They should actually kind of enjoy it because they're relaxing, and generally they like it. I'm done. Yeah. All right, Mr. Gus is gonna go to bed, and I'll be right back. Come, Gussie. We gotta talk about the other half of the equation. So, we already kind of talked about how you can make yourself light, make yourself heavy, how you can influence your own weight with gravity in terms of your horse. Of course, we can do the same thing for ourselves. So, it is, like Lisa asked, how do we cue it on our horse? Well, we have to be able to impact our own relationship with gravity if we want to be able to impact our horse. So in addition to that, it's all, when we're on a horse, when we're on the ground, we have the ground as our solid surface. When we're on a horse, we have no solid surface. The only thing we have to act on that's solid is our core. So when we're giving aids from our arms, from our legs, any sort of aid, our core is like our anchor spot that it needs to come off of. Personally, I think one of the biggest disservices we've done is it's thought of as the worst thing ever is a stiff rider or having tension in your body. We don't want to be stiff. Of course we don't want to be stiff. But the definition of stiffness is supporting a joint on all sides. So I'm going to use my wrist as an example here. If I have no stiffness in my wrist and I flop my hand around, my wrist goes everywhere, right? There's a lot of extraneous movement. If I put tone in my wrist and I wave it around, it's not moving, right? There's no extraneous movement, but I can still move my wrist within that. I can have tension and I can move within it, right? So maybe stability is a better word than stiffness, but I hear so often like, oh, being a stiff rider is the worst thing ever. Well, stiffness is stabilization of the joint. And if all we're thinking about is being loose, we are giving our horse a lot of very confusing aids. They can't understand what's going on if we're flopping around up there, and we can't support our own weight. So when I had you guys all pretend to be light, there's an amount of tension and stiffness in your body, right, in order to be able to support yourself against gravity. If we're just a sack of potatoes, we have no support of our own body, and there's no way our horse is going to be able to move its own weight up into engaging its core if we're a sack of potatoes up there. If you've ever given someone a piggyback ride and they're kind of supporting themselves, it's pretty easy to move them around. I have a 3-year-old, he tends to be a sack of potatoes. Even my little 3-year-old's weight on my back is like, oh my gosh, I'm getting thrown around everywhere. So it's really important that we learn to stabilize our joint from all sides. So we already talked about how the human spine is built to withstand compression. Well, that's only if we have muscles supporting our spine. It's got a lot of air in the joint. There's a lot of movement within the joint. And so if we imagine this is our spine and gravity compresses against us and we have no stabilization, it's going to just bow out any which direction. How are we supposed to give effective aids off of that, whether it be our leg aid or our half halt aid being able to give to our horse? The force of compression of the horse moving up and down is just going to compress us. And so if you imagine I put a little ring around this with a guy wire system all around it, even this flimsy little whip, if I compress it and it's got support on all sides, now that's nice and stable, right? And it doesn't have a whole lot of extra movement. I can probably even dangle some weight off of this little whip if I have support all the way around it, and it can withstand that weight. So that's us being able to push our arms forward and stabilize our core. So like I said, I don't love talking about that stiffness is bad. When stiffness is bad is imagine that compression has kind of collapsed the spine in a way that I've now put the whip towards its end of how much mobility it has. That's stiff in a bad way. So usually when you think about a stiff rider in a bad sense, it's because they don't have enough stability. They've collapsed usually kind of through here, and now they are stiff because the joints are locked out, versus having stability all the way around and being able to support where it's kind of elastic, like that wrist. You can still move with your horse, but now you're influencing the horse without all that extra movement, rather than being kind of tossed around by the horse's movement and gravity without that support. So I'll get off my little pedestal here, but that's how I feel about stiffness. That's pretty much it. We're gonna get through this section pretty quickly, guys. So yeah, like I said, if you have, so imagine that guy wire system. If I have one cable or a few cables in that are weak, that's where it's gonna collapse to. So if you're a rider who tends to collapse to one side, or you have some difficulty in being straight or whatever within your riding, a lot of times that's because you're lacking stability in one of those guy wires. And so when the compression happens, that's the direction that everything's going to kind of collapse to. Does that make sense? Just imagining my analogy here. Great. So why do we need to train off the horse? Why are we going to be talking about this? Well, the brain and body connection is built off of, the brain tells the body what to do. And the more we use a certain neurological circuit, the stronger that gets. So if we're right-handed, we're used to writing with our right hand, we break our right hand, have to start using our left. At first, it takes a lot of concentration to use our left hand when we're writing. After a few weeks, it gets a lot easier because the brain is making that neurological circuit, going to that left hand, stronger over time by laying down certain things within the neurology. And so if we're only working on this when we're actually riding, there's a lot of things to be thinking about when we're riding, especially if we're in a lesson. I've got a million things to think about. We cannot be thinking about stabilizing our core and all these little things I'm going to tell you while we're riding the horse at all moments. So if we're working on this stuff when we're off the horse, we're grooving that neurological pattern or muscle memory so that when we get on the horse, we don't have to think so much about it. You're still going to have to think about it. Just be real. But we want to strengthen that circuit so that you're not, it's kind of like what we were doing with the horse and teaching it to use these different muscles and how hard they had to focus. That's what it's going to feel like when we start working on some of this core stuff for you guys. The more you can work on that off of the horse, the easier that's going to be when you're on the horse. So the stuff that we're going to be talking about, I'm not going to give you guys some crazy core workout that you're going to be super sore after. We're going to be talking more about those neurological circuits, getting your anatomy lined up. When you're riding, we want to stabilize on all sides of the joint. We don't want to lock down every single joint so you can't move. That's not the stiffness we're looking for. We're looking for activation. And so we're going to talk about how we're going to activate all the way around. The more you can think about that, the better it's gonna be. So even if all you took away from this was the position that I put you in, and you think about that through your day with everything that you're doing, that's gonna make a huge difference. So like I said, this is not gonna be like a crazy core workout. We're not gonna be getting on the ground or anything. But I want you guys to think about this stuff throughout your day and the things you're doing. It'll make a big difference for when you're riding. So, I'll have you guys all get up now. It is time. So the spine actually has no muscles that run down the front of it. The only thing that supports the spine from the front is the pressure in our abdomen. So we've got muscles in the back of our spine. We've got ab muscles that wrap around in front. We've got a big cavity of our abdomen here, and then we have the muscles in front. And so when we want to support our spine from the front, what we have to do is activate the muscles and breathe down into our abdomen to like blowing up a balloon in our abdomen to support that spine from the front. So we already did a little bit with kind of rib flare when we were talking about the horses, where I had you guys flare up and come down. Actually, the position of ribs being flared up is really common in a lot of people, especially if we don't know how to properly activate our abs and we get on the horse and our trainer says put our shoulders back, do this. The ribs flare up. We already talked about this in the horse. That's going to stretch the front of the abdomen. Now, if I'm trying to breathe into my abdomen to support my spine from the front, this is a really stretched part of that balloon. That air is going to bulge out here. It's not going to support my spine. So the very first thing I want you guys to do is take your fingers like little measuring sticks, bottom of your ribs and the pointy parts of your hips. And think about bringing those two things closer together. So you're gonna bring your ribs down towards your pelvis. It's gonna be like a little mini crunch. You might feel your belly button come a little bit in. Notice how that ever so slightly flattens out your low back. Not because I said flatten your low back, but because we brought those abs into a little bit shorter position there. Now, from there, maintaining that position, take your fingers, wrap them around yourself, and I want you to take a few big breaths and imagine that your stomach is a balloon and goes out in all 360 degrees. At first, you might feel like it's only wanting to go to the front or only wanting to go front and back. You want it to go all directions, stabilizing your whole spine around. Can everyone feel that? So that's using, no. Okay, we know what you need to work on. So this is how we use our breath to engage our core. The amount of core activation that you feel while you're doing this, that's about the amount of stiffness that I'm looking for. It's not a grip, but it's something that you could maintain for a 45-minute ride, right? So that level of activation where you can breathe down into your stomach and those abs kind of compress that balloon enough that your spine gets some stability from the front, that's creating the stability in your torso that now you could push your hands forward, you could use your legs, wrap them around, and you'll probably notice as you're working on this that you're not super heavy, right? You're kind of supporting yourself up. This is a really good kind of athletic position that you're supported in your core, that your limbs could move off of really well. So all limbs are coming off of core, right? We don't have the ground, so we want to make sure that core is really stable so that every movement we're doing of a limb is actually moving the limb, not collapsing our upper body. Okay, so that's going to be the position that we're going to do everything off of. Now we're going to take our resistance bands. I gave these to you guys because I think they're a really good warm-up exercise before you get on your horse. You're going to wrap it around your back and hold it here. You're going to get into that same position again where those ribs come a little bit down. Keep breathing down into your core, so not into your chest. You don't want those ribs to flare up. Keep breathing into your core. Keep your shoulder blades connected to your core, and you're just going to push this forward. You'll feel like kind of pushing to your back. Your abs will have to engage a little bit more. But it shouldn't feel like you're doing a crazy crunch, right? It's just enough activation to keep your core stable as you push your hands forward. Does everyone feel that? That's you giving to your horse while you're riding. Or you're trying to do a movement on your horse. You have to engage a little bit more. It's not a grip. It's not a full force tension, but it needs to be something that you can hold for a long period of time. Again, this is grooving that neurological pathway. This is developing muscle memory that I can move my arms off of my body and my core is not going to try to flare up. Of course, we're thinking a lot about this right now, so we want to be thinking about this throughout our whole day so that it just becomes kind of second nature.
How do you breathe?
I was imagining when I designed this workout, we were going to be in an arena that I could loop this around. So if you guys want to go one by one up to here, you can, but I also can just show this to you as another good warm up. These are good things to do before you get on. You toss this around a fence post or your horse's stall. You can do the same thing in reverse. Keep those ribs down, holding this, bringing back. Being able to bring your shoulder blades back without flaring up. This is how we get nice posture without losing the stability in our core. Okay. Another way, actually, you can do this if you guys want to do it here. It's just not in our riding position, but you can toss it around one of your feet. And you can do it here. It's just a little bit different motion. Sorry, I should have made these a little bit longer, but.
Won't that just build our biceps up a lot?
This is actually more for your back muscles than your biceps. So bend forward here. So that's why I like doing it standing better, but you want to be like chest pointed at your foot with this so that it's bringing your shoulder blades back. There you go.
Jamie, when you lean over like that though, maybe I didn't hear what she said. Should you be thinking about your shoulders being down as we go shoulder?
It's better when you're standing upright because it's gonna feel more like you're riding.
Yeah.
If you don't want to bring your shoulder blades up toward your shoulders. No shoulder blades as shoulders as earrings with this one. You want to think about bringing them back and together. Typically, when you go up, you're going to end up flaring those ribs a little bit. So if you're really thinking about keeping those ribs down, it'll help you get the shoulder movement we're looking for here. But really, the point of the band is that you can use your limbs off of your core without disengaging your core. Core exercises that you're moving your core a lot are not going to do you a whole lot of good for riding. It might give you nice abs for the beach. But really, you want to be thinking about moving your limbs off of a stable core. So the third exercise, in the back over here, that I had for the bands here is to add a little bit of a twist. These bands are a little bit strong for it, so if you have other bands, they're going to be better. But little bit of a twist here.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be the least safe of the few because twisting is a little bit riskier with the spine. Don't do that one until you're pretty confident in your ability to activate your core. But that's going to be your half pass, right? You're not like crazy turning your body in a half pass, but that little bit of can I rotate my torso, but keep that rib cage really anchored to my core so that I still can use my limbs off of it. This is not a great band for this one. If you happen to have a lighter band, I got this entire roll for $13 off of Amazon. So if you get a little bit lighter band there, it is a really good exercise. It's called kind of a wood chop. So you hook it around something, hold it, and just rotate a little bit. Or you can do it with your arms like you're riding. But again, just training that neurologic pathway, challenging your core a little bit. It's not a lot. We're not like fatiguing it like crazy. It's a little bit. Okay, we can go ahead and ditch these. I'm going to do a few more.
So what really helped me with your sister, she talks about your zipper, touching the zipper.
Yeah.
And then you're not doing your shoulders, but you're engaging your core.
Yep.
That helped me a lot.
Totally. So yeah, just some cues when you're riding that I found helpful. Tucking the zipper. I'll sometimes think like belly button to your bra strap. We're all women here, so I can say that. A little bit here. Now the only thing is if we're only focusing on the lower abs, we can still sometimes have the flare in the ribs. And so that when the ribs flare up, the head tends to come forward for somebody who jets your head forward when you ride. So sometimes with another cue that can be helpful if you find that you do get a lot of rib flare is to think bring the chin back. It'll automatically bring your ribs down a little bit. So just kind of different ways of cueing in. Again, I'm not here to be your horse trainer, but either bringing that rib cage and the pelvis closer together is going to bring that ab muscle shorter so that it can support your whole core a little bit more. Okay, and then last ones here that I wanted to do. Oh no, there's two more. One I'm just going to talk about. Single arm carries are really great for activating the core like this. We got a lot of opportunities for that at the barn. Carrying buckets, carrying brush bags, anything that you want to carry. If you're carrying something down the barn aisle, think about this core engagement. Hold it on one side only because that's going to load the other side of your core. So we like to balance ourselves because it's easier for our core. But if we pick something up, really think about keeping that alignment equal on both sides, carrying it down the barn aisle. Make sure you switch when you put it away. But that's like one of the best things you can do for building that stability in your core is carrying something in one hand. When I go grocery shopping, I tend to use a basket instead of a cart if I can. This is a really good opportunity to work on your core, but this is where I say, like, it's doing it more often is more important than doing it really intensely, right? Like, you can find little places throughout your day to do this in a way that will impact your riding without having to add extra stuff to your schedule. With that being said, we're gonna add something extra to your schedule here. So we're gonna go ahead and come against the wall here and spread out. We got plenty of space in this arena. And we're gonna do, so plank is a really great exercise, but that kind of falls into the category of a more difficult exercise. It's gonna kind of go to fatigue, whereas we're really trying to train the pathway. So we're gonna do a modified wall plank here, and it's up to you guys. You can do it as a typical plank on your forearms or on your hands here, or if you wanna really apply it to riding, you can take your hands like a rein and lean yourself a little bit against the wall, just kind of on your fists. So if you're doing the fists, put your elbows against your side like you're holding a rein here. Now think about that rib coming down, activating your core, do a few breaths, make sure with that slight forward lean that you still feel that activation all the way around your core, you're breathing down into your abdomen. Now one thing at a time, we're gonna start with our arms, so you can raise an arm up, keep your abs activated, so you can feel yourself really stable, going down, up. You can even just push one hand at a time into the fence, and you'll feel like that would kind of be the equivalent of turning for a half pass, right? That you can put pressure on one side like you're going to turn your body or go to a 10-meter circle, and that core stays active all the way around. Now the harder part of this, we're going to go one leg at a time, starting with being able to bring it slightly back. So don't let those ribs flare, don't disconnect your pelvis from your rib cage as you push that leg back, one leg at a time, and then you're going to go a little bit out. So you can do it either straight leg or bent knee, but just being able to move that hip around without losing the engagement of your core. Sounds really easy. It's not as easy as you would think, right? To really keep that pelvis locked down on your rib cage as you move that leg around, particularly as the leg goes back, you're gonna feel those lower abs disengage. So that might be a good place to think belly button to bra strap there to keep that pelvis a little bit tucked. If you're really struggling with that, you might need to work a little bit on your hip extension. If you don't have enough extension at the hip, you're gonna go to your low back there. So if you're somebody who finds when you ride that you tend to get your legs too far forward, you might just need to get on more glute control, or you might not actually have the hip extension.
What about breathing? I find myself like, I'm trying to fill that gap and with that level of tension, and then I stop breathing.
Yep, super common. So this is why we want to do it often, right? And if it feels like it's too challenging, you can go more upright with it. That's kind of it's probably not that you can't breathe, it's that you're not used to breathing like this. Your body's having a hard time thinking about too many things at once.
Stuck right here.
Yep, exactly. And that's especially in women. We have been conditioned to suck in our stomachs and we end up breathing in our chest because we don't want our belly to move. So we suck in here, we flare our chest up, and we breathe in our chest. Also, we have bras that constrict us right around our rib cage. Really common things I see chiropractically when I work on people. And so it's a practice to learn how to breathe down into our abdomen. And our diaphragm tucks up under our ribs like this. When we breathe in, it actually drops down. So sometimes that helps to visualize it, that diaphragm is dropping down and filling up our abdomen as we breathe in. But that's something you can work on even when you drive, right? Just adding the breathing. It's a huge component of our core activation that gets overlooked a lot when we're doing really intense core workouts. Now, of course, all this can be taken to more challenging core workouts. When we're doing things like, difficult planks and whatnot, these are more for like building mass of muscles. Nothing wrong with that, but very rarely when we're riding are we going to be using the activation of a full plank. So I have nothing against planks. It's kind of like doing cavaletti work for your horse. If you're doing it with the right muscles engaged, planks are a really great exercise. But it is much more important that you're doing it in the proper shape than doing a plank as long as you possibly can in a not using the right muscles, right? So I'll give an example because I don't mind getting dirty. If I'm doing a plank hanging my belly down like this, there's no point, right? I can hold this for 5 minutes and be really sore after. It's not doing any good for my riding. If I really think about bringing that rib cage and that pelvis close together, I'm gonna draw my elbows towards my feet here. You can see I already can get a little bit of a tremble from 5 seconds of doing this, that's gonna be much more effective for me. If I'm not strong enough to do that, it's much better to do it against the wall properly than to do it on the ground poorly. So that's why I didn't want to make it about doing really hard core exercises, because you can take this shape and how you're using your core to everything you do, and that's going to be the most beneficial thing for your riding. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. What do you do wrong when it goes in your neck?
So yeah, common thing, you want to come up here instead. We're going to talk, we're going to work on you. But so for you, I would probably recommend doing it down here to start rather than up here. Getting some body work to release up here is going to be helpful. And then when you bring those shoulder blades back, think about bringing them down and back. Bring your rib cage a little down here. Yep, there you go, good. Now bring your shoulder blade into your opposite back pocket. There, good. Don't throw those ribs up as you go. Good, perfect. Good there. Different? There you go, good. Does anyone else want me to pick on their position a little bit? Yeah. This thing, right? Yep. Bring your chest bone. That's good. There you go. Yep. There you go. That's okay. Bring your head back a little bit now. So give yourself a double chin. Back. There. Yep. Good.
Well, when you get down, I don't want to be on
Oh, there. Yep. There you go. Good. I'll bring your shoulder blades here in your opposite back pocket. There. Good. Okay. Now see if you can move a limb off of that.
Interesting.
Yep. There you go. Shows you where you can work. But see, I mean, none of it is like crazy hardcore work. It's not what you're going to see on Instagram. But if you can do everything with that in that position, it's going to give you a really stable base when you're riding.
Interesting.
And you should feel it here, you're saying, or not here?
With the
Agree with
extension,
these
yeah.
things.
So you don't want to. It's not necessarily where you feel it; it's where the movement comes from. So I in theory should have. That's about as much actual hip extension as I have. To go beyond that, I have to arch my back, which is not what I want. Yeah. So it's what I tend to do when I ride. I tend to perch forward and arch my low back because I have a lot of curves. So I have to really think about keeping these two together, kind of locked down. Then I use my leg going back.
I do this, I tuck this in, get turtle-like. Protect myself.
So
Please don't hurt me. So I become this monkey on his back, right? You know, and so this whole thing. But that's where I get the breath stuck too, is when I stretch up, I'm like,
So for you, take your arms here, lock your wrists down, rotate your arms out. That's your shoulder blades back, put your core down. So now keep your shoulder blades where they are, but relax your arms and push them forward. You're gonna feel it in your toes.
oh, I can't.
Yep. That's stabilizing your shoulder blade, where we lack a lot of that. If I want to get a little crunchy here, we evolved, one of the basic movements humans evolved to do was climb. Evolutionarily, we were supposed to climb a lot. How many of you guys have climbed since you were kids?
No.
Very few. So we've lost a lot of
climb onto
mobility
my
through our rib
horse.
cage and our shoulder blades by doing everything here. Phones, computers, driving, riding. All of it is here unless we maybe go to CrossFit and do some pull-ups. So we've lost a lot of that stability of our lower shoulder blades. So we tend to recruit whoever I just talked to you about using your upper back. We'll try to stabilize our shoulders by raising here instead of by anchoring down. And because we don't have that mobility through our rib cage to get those shoulder blades back and down, we end up flaring the rib cage up to try to sit tall. And then we end up breathing from our chest. There's a lot of kind of patterns because we don't live how we evolved to live. So, yeah.
So in that context, I'm imagining some lat pull downs.
Sure.
So how do you? I know you can't quite stabilize your shoulder blades. I mean, you can. I mean, physically, but you want to kind of think about having this level and then just doing this, right? And just kind of allowing a focus of this and building the mobility, a little more flexion, like that. Okay.
Yeah, lat pull downs are really great. You want to make sure when you're doing them that you're not doing this.
Yeah.
So
Just keeping your riding position. I'm thinking I want to feel exactly like I'm in the saddle, and I want to isolate this area and work on this. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep, and you want to make sure on the top part of this, Really think about shoulder blades in your opposite back pocket. You don't want to pull it down from here. Your lats are down here, so use that lat. I mean, the way you're demonstrating it looks good, so I think you're probably doing it right.
Okay.
But just speaking to the group here.
It just kind of feels like how, I'm just imagining I'm in the saddle.
Yeah.
And I want to do a lat pull down,
Yep.
right? And I want to keep everything like I would if I was in the saddle.
Yep, absolutely.
Keep that visualization.
Anybody else want me to pick on them?
I want to thank you.
Okay. Let's see it. Nice, looks pretty good. Okay, now draw your elbows towards your feet, pull in. So leave them where they are, but think like you're gonna pull the ground together. Yeah, good, rotate a little bit under with your pelvis. Yep, there you go, good. Bring that hip closer to your rib cage.
And keep breathing.
Yep.
Oh, that too, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the trick.
That little bit of squeeze is how you can make plank a lot harder.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
Yep.
Because you're activating everything,
Yep.
right? It's all kind of coming together in an isometric way.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and then bring your head a little bit back.
Lay down and roll over.
Tuck your chin a little bit and bring your ears more in line with your shoulders.
Okay.
So head here towards the sky.
Steps to it.
So hold your hair here. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
So look at me for a second. Yeah. So you're a little here.
Oh, I got it.
Yep, there you go.
So the height is okay?
Yep, good. And then if that's feeling a little bit too easy for anyone, you can do all the same stuff we just did there with your plank. Reach the arm forward.
Yeah.
Reach the leg back. Or if you want to get really fancy, opposite arm, opposite leg. But that's being able to work the limbs off of the core all comes from that core position.
What is about a side plank?
Side planks are great. They really challenge the side of the glutes. I didn't even get into this, but riders tend to be really dominant on their inner legs. We do one of the only sports where we're gripping towards midline. Pretty much all other sports are working the outside of our glutes. That's why I made a business out of seeing riders, because it screws up our pelvises that we're really over dominant here. So side plank is going to activate the core. It's also going to activate this side glute here. Again, there's a lot of ways to do it that are not working the right muscles, but you want to make sure, most importantly, when you're in that side, that you still are keeping this locked down here. So you don't want to be arching forward here, falling back here. Keep that in a line. You're going to feel it obviously more.
What is this when you go under?
Yeah, totally fine, as long as you're keeping that good position here. All these things are way more activation than you're going to need when you're riding, but if you're trying to actually build strength, yeah, great exercises.
Okay.
Get my workout.
Breath, huh?
Yeah.
I need a one-on-one for an hour. Yeah.
I know that was a lot of information on a lot of different topics. But
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
I'm sure Vicki has my contact.
Yes, we will post it. All of this will be posted on the cdseastbay.org website. And obviously, Jamie is wonderful about responding. So if you have questions, you also do private training, private clinics, private everything. So if your horse want a joint session, do it. It's, there's so many benefits to this, obviously. So not only for how we feel every day, but for the longevity of ourselves and our horse. Because I think they're proving out now so many of these horses are injured young because they're not in the right posture. So this helps everybody stay at it for a lot longer than you might normally. So without good training. So thank you.
Yeah, that was something that I forgot to mention on the horse part, is when we talked about like the horses in the wild sprinting, like they don't care about pounding their joints because they move for a few minutes and then they rest. Whereas our horses have to move for extended periods. So the lighter we can teach them to move and hold themselves up and do that dance across the arena instead of sprint across the arena, the less wear and tear they get on their joints over time. So, jumping around a lot. But. Thank you guys all.